So for this vlog, I chose to do the second habit, begin with the end in mind. And I went ahead and I chose 3 more points that I find to be really important to not just this habit, but the entire book. And I think what really sets the tone for this habit is on page 74, about three-fourths of the way down. He says, Habit 1 says you are the driver of your life, not the passenger. Habit 2 says, since you're the driver, decide where to go and draw a map of how to get there. And so, like even he said earlier in the book, all of these are connected and they all are sequential. That one goes after the next. And I feel like this is really important because I feel often as teenagers, we're kind of either we're told what we need to do or we're told where we need to go or we just don't worry about it at all. And I feel like that's really unhealthy. And I think not only knowing where we want to get there, knowing where we want to go, but also thinking of how we're actually going to get there is very important, especially um, for the purpose of building that skill for later in life as an adult when you intend to get a job. Yes. And then the second point that I decided was really important is on page 84, and I think it's a quote by Michelangelo. Well, not a quote per se, but someone once asked him how he was able to carve such a beautiful sculpture, and he said the sculpture was already inside the block of granite from the very beginning, and he just had to chisel off everything else around it. And so I think that's a really good analogy for thinking what beginning with the end in mind is like, and truly planning for where you want to go and what you want to do. Because if you sit and you plan it out, it's you know where you want to go, you know what you want to do, you have the path in mind, and now it's about making the right decisions, chiseling away everything that's not important, everything you don't need to do, everything that's a waste of time, but also keeping in mind that your entire life isn't just that path, and that there are certain things that you can't control, certain things that will happen. Let's say Michelangelo, he was in the process of carving out the sculpture that he believed to be inside the block of granite, but then maybe he chipped off a little too much on, like, the nose. Well, that's okay. That's just a change that he needs to make in the moment, and I think that's also a really important skill, being able to adapt really well to the present and not just plan for the future and expect it to go that way. So I think that's a really good analogy for what it's like to begin with the end in mind. The final point that I chose is on page 102, and it's a poem that does a really good job at showing or stating that just because you've had certain things either handed to you or you've been in a fortunate enough decision to be considered beautiful, strong, or intelligent, just because even if you don't have any of those things, that doesn't mean that you can't be an effective person, effective planner, or good at what you do, because I feel like as teenagers we're often in this very extreme mindset. We're like, either I'm this or I'm this. There's like no in between. There's no gray area. And I feel like often we just kind of label ourselves and we're like, okay, well, if I'm this, then I'm not this, and if I'm this, then I'm this. And I feel like this poem does a really good job at saying what it means to grow as a person, quite literally. It says, the tree that never had to fight for sun and sky and air and light, but stood out in the open, plain, and always got its share of rain, never became a forest king, but lived and died a scrubby thing. Good timber doesn't grow with ease, the strong win the stronger trees. So, in a literal sense, it means, well, if the tree doesn't have anything to fight against, it has no reason to adapt to its environment. It has everything that it's needed, so it can just stay small and what it's used to and the way it comes out of the ground, essentially. But in order to get forest and really well-developed plant life, and then connecting this to people and life, in order to get people who are really well-rounded, really grown, is to be through those weathering experiences. Those are very important, and in the time we always, not always, but most of the time we see them as very negative and very, oh, why did this have to happen to me? When in reality we should be thinking of it as a moment of growth. And I feel like, again, that's a really important point to make for teenagers, because again, we're always in this extreme mindset of like, why did this have to happen to me? Why is this negative thing happening? Instead of thinking of it as a moment of growth and thinking of it as a moment that just kind of happens in life. It's not necessarily happening to you, it's just happening, and you happen to be um, what a teenager might consider a victim of circumstance. So yeah, I feel like those are three very important points to not only this habit, this book, but in general in life, and specifically to teens. And I think he does a really good job at conveying all of these points in a very consistent and well-spoken manner.